You don't get married thinking it's going to fall apart. When I stood across from Monica on our wedding day, looking into her bright, smiling eyes, I truly believed it was forever. She was my everything, beautiful, confident, and full of life. I knew I wasn't the most exciting guy in the world, but I thought I was enough for her. For years, I worked my ass off to make sure we had a good life. My construction business wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on. I came home every night sore and exhausted, but proud because I knew I was doing it for my family. For Monica and our son, Ben. We didn't have a fancy house, but it was ours. The bills were paid, the fridge was stocked, and I always made sure Monica and Ben had everything they needed. I thought we were building something together. I thought Monica saw it that way too. But looking back, I can see the cracks were already there. It started small, so small I didn't even register it at first. Monica used to sit with me in the evenings after Ben went to bed. We'd watch TV or just talk about our day. But then, little by little, she started pulling away. "I'm too tired," she'd say, brushing me off with a tired smile. Or, "I have to call the girls." "You don't mind, right?" At first, I didn't. Everyone needs space sometimes. But then came the complaints. "Dean, do you have to wear those old boots all the time? You look like a slob." I laughed it off. "They're comfortable. Besides, they're good enough for work." "Well, maybe you could try to look decent for once," she muttered, barely hiding her annoyance. I didn't think much of it. Monica had always been a little particular about appearances, but she'd never seemed ashamed of me before. Then came the criticisms about my personality. "You're so predictable, Dean," she said one night, barely looking up from her phone. "Don't you ever want to do something fun for a change?" I thought tossing the football with Ben and grilling burgers was fun. I joked, trying to lighten the mood. She didn't laugh. I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed or bored. Marriage isn't always easy, right? Sometimes you just have to ride out the rough patches. But the more I tried to convince myself everything was fine, the more obvious it became that something was wrong. One evening, Monica announced she was going out with the girls. "You got everything covered, right?" she asked as she stood in front of the mirror, carefully applying her lipstick. "Of course," I said, glancing at her reflection. "Who's going?" She hesitated for a split second before replying, "Just some of the girls from yoga." "Yoga? I didn't know you were doing yoga now." She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "I just started. It's nothing serious." It didn't feel right, but I didn't want to be the jealous husband, so I let it go. "Do you want me to drive you?" I offered. "No," she said quickly, her voice sharp. Then softening, she added, "I mean, it's fine. They're picking me up." That was the first time I really started to wonder if she was lying to me. Then there was the night that changed everything. It was late, probably past midnight. I'd been fixing a busted faucet in the kitchen, trying to unwind after a long day. As I passed our bedroom, I heard Monica laughing. It wasn't just any laugh. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. Warm, real, full of joy. I stepped into the doorway and found her sitting cross-legged on the bed, her phone glowing in her hands. She was smiling, her lips curling in that soft, familiar way that used to be reserved for me. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice casual. "What's so funny?" She jumped like she'd been caught stealing. Her fingers flew across the screen, and the phone went dark. "Oh, nothing," she said quickly, holding the phone close to her chest. "Just something Mary sent me." "Mary again." "It was always Mary." "Must have been hilarious," I said, leaning against the door frame. "Yeah, it was," she replied, avoiding my eyes. "Anyway, I'm going to bed. You should too." I didn't push her. I just stood there, watching as she slid her phone under her pillow and turned off the light. But something about the way she'd hidden the phone, it didn't feel right. After that night, I started noticing more. Her phone was always face down on the counter, like she didn't want anyone to see the screen. She never left it unattended, not even to use the bathroom. And when it buzzed, she'd grab it so quickly, it was like her life depended on it. One day, I caught a glimpse of her screen as she swiped away a notification. The name wasn't Mary. It was just a number, no name attached. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but deep down I knew better. The Monica I thought I knew, the woman I'd built my life around, was slipping away. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was keeping something from me. They say kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. I always thought I was protecting Ben from the tension in our marriage, But it turns out he was watching and listening far more closely than I realized. One evening, I was sitting in my home office, going over paperwork for a new project. Ben appeared in the doorway, his face unusually serious. "Hey, Dad," he said, shifting awkwardly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course," I said, setting my pen down. "What's up?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder, as if checking to make sure Monica wasn't nearby. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "It's about Mom," he said quietly. My stomach twisted. "What about her?" Ben looked down at the floor, his fingers nervously picking at the hem of his t-shirt. "I think she's hiding something." I forced myself to stay calm. "Why do you think that?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this on her phone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I emailed it to myself and printed it at school. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the paper. It was a screenshot of a photo. Monica leaning against a car, smiling at a man who had his arm around her waist. Beneath it was a short exchange of text messages. "Monica, can't wait to see you again. Tonight? Unknown number. Always beautiful. Same time? Monica, you know it." My chest tightened as I stared at the paper. There was no mistaking the look on her face in that photo. It was the same look she used to give me. "Who is he?" Ben asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "But I'm going to find out." Ben nodded, his jaw tightening. "Don't tell Mom I showed you this," he said. "I won't. I promised." "You did the right thing." For a moment, we just sat there in silence. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the way he was struggling to process what he'd found. He was too young to be dealing with this, but here we were. "Dad," he said finally, "what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But whatever happens, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Ben nodded. "Yeah, I trust you." His words hit me hard. I knew I couldn't let him down. In the days that followed, I started paying closer attention to Monica. She thought she had me fooled. Hell, she probably thought she was being clever. But to me, her behavior was like a flashing neon sign. She became overly cheerful, almost as if she were trying to overcompensate. She'd cook dinner, something she hadn't done in years, and act like everything was perfectly normal. "I made your favorite tonight," she said one evening, setting a plate of chicken marsala in front of me. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "Smells great." She smiled back, but there was something off about it. Too tight, too practiced. Then there were the little excuses. "I have to run errands," she'd say, grabbing her keys and rushing out the door. "Don't wait up for me." Each time, I checked the clock. Every errand seemed to take exactly 2 hours, no matter what day it was or what she claimed to be doing. Monica thought she was being cautious, but the more I watched her, the more cracks I noticed in her facade. Late one night, after Monica had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with her phone records spread out in front of me. I'd requested them from our provider under the guise of needing a detailed breakdown for billing purposes. What I found made my blood run cold. Dozens of calls and texts to the same number. It wasn't saved in her contacts, but it was there, day after day, week after week. Sometimes the calls were short, just a minute or two. Other times they stretched on for an hour or more. I stared at the records, my mind racing. Who the hell was this guy? And what gave him the right to come into my life and destroy my family? I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I stopped myself. I needed more proof. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny it or find a way to cover her tracks. No, I had to be smart about this. One night, Monica told me she was meeting Mary for drinks. "She's been going through a rough time," she said, grabbing her coat. "I just want to be there for her." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "That's really thoughtful of you." As soon as she walked out the door, I grabbed my keys and followed her. She drove across town to a small bar, the kind of place that didn't ask too many questions. I parked a few spaces away and waited. 5 minutes later, a car pulled up next to hers. A man got out, tall, well-dressed, and far too familiar with my wife. He leaned down to kiss her, and she didn't hesitate. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. But instead of storming out of the car, I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures. Snap after snap, I documented everything. Their embrace, the way he held her hand as they walked inside, the way she laughed at whatever he said. When I got home that night, Ben was waiting for me in the living room. "Well?" he asked, his voice tentative. I sat down heavily on the couch, the weight of what I'd seen settling on my shoulders. "It's worse than I thought," I admitted. Ben nodded solemnly. "What are we going to do?" "We're not going to do anything," I said. "Not yet. But when the time comes, I need you to be ready." His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a determination there that reminded me of myself. "I'm ready, Dad," he said quietly. The thing about Monica was that she didn't just think she was clever, she thought she was invincible. After all, I'd never been the jealous type. I never checked her phone, never asked too many questions. That made me the perfect target for someone like her. After I followed her to the bar that night and saw her with him, laughing, touching, kissing, I thought she might tone things down, act more careful, but no. She came home late that night, reeking of his cologne, and went right to bed without a care in the world. The next morning, she was all smiles. She made pancakes for breakfast, something she hadn't done in years, and sat across from me at the table like nothing had happened. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, sipping her coffee. I forced a smile like a baby. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet, but her fake sweetness made my skin crawl. That day, I started digging. First, I checked the pictures I'd taken the night before. They were crystal clear. Monica, arm in arm with her lover, walking into the bar. Monica, leaning into him like he was the love of her life. Monica, smiling the way she used to smile at me. I saved every photo to a hidden folder on my phone and backed them up to a cloud account, just in case. Then I got to work on her phone records. I'd already seen the dozens of calls and texts to the same number, but now I paid closer attention to the timing. Every day when I was at work, every evening when she was out with the girls, she was talking to him. And the calls were getting longer. That's when I knew this wasn't just some fling. This was something bigger. A few days later, I found the proof that sealed it. Monica's purse was sitting on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs, probably on the phone with him, and Ben was at school. I knew I shouldn't go through her things. It felt wrong. But at this point, I was desperate. I rifled through the bag, careful not to leave any trace that I'd been there. That's when I found it. A crumpled up hotel receipt. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. It was dated just a week earlier. The room was in her name, and the charges included a bottle of champagne and breakfast for two. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Who the hell was this guy? What gave him the right to come into my life and destroy my family? I needed to know more. The next time Monica left the house, I followed her again. This time, she didn't go to the bar. She went to a park on the other side of town. I parked a safe distance away and watched as she got out of her car. A few minutes later, he arrived. He was tall, good-looking, and dressed like he just stepped out of a catalog. He walked up to Monica, and she greeted him with a kiss that made my blood boil. I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures. They sat on a bench talking and laughing like a happy couple. Then he pulled out his phone, and Monica leaned in to look at something on the screen. I zoomed in with my camera and managed to catch his face in perfect detail. Later that night, I used every tool at my disposal to figure out who he was. A reverse image search on his photo led me to his LinkedIn profile. His name was Jason Carter, and he worked at a real estate firm in the city. He was married. The profile picture was him and his wife, an elegant blonde who looked like she had no idea what kind of man she was married to. When I showed Ben what I'd found, he was furious. "Does his wife know?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Not yet," I said, "but she will." "What about Mom?" "Not yet," I repeated. "We need to do this the right way." Ben nodded, his jaw tight. "Tell me what you need me to do." His willingness to help broke my heart. He shouldn't have to be part of this. But if Monica was willing to destroy our family, I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. The next day, I started putting my plan into motion. First, I reached out to Jason's wife. I sent her an email with the photos I'd taken and a brief message. "I thought you want to know." She responded within hours, thanking me and asking if we could meet. I agreed, and we set a date to talk in person. Next, I started planning the party. I told Monica I wanted to host a little get-together for our friends and family. "It's been a tough year," I said, keeping my voice warm and sincere. "I think we could all use a reason to celebrate." She loved the idea. "You're so thoughtful, Dean," she said, kissing me on the cheek. I forced myself to smile. If only she knew what I was really planning. Planning the party was almost too easy. Monica thought I was doing it to rekindle our relationship, to remind everyone how perfect we were as a couple. She smiled as I hung decorations in the living room and helped me choose the menu. "You're so sweet, Dean," she said one evening, wrapping her arms around my waist. "I feel like we're reconnecting." I nodded, forcing a smile. "We are. Elite." Inside, I felt nothing but disgust. The trickiest part of my plan was making sure Jason would be there. Monica wouldn't invite him herself. That would be too risky. So I had to do it indirectly. I reached out to a mutual acquaintance, a guy from Jason's office who occasionally came to our family barbecues. "Hey," I said casually, "I'm throwing a little party for Monica. Do you think Jason and his wife would want to come?" "Yeah, probably," he said. "Jason loves a good party. I'll let him know." Perfect. The house was packed with friends and family, all chatting and laughing as music played softly in the background. Monica was in her element, floating from group to group with a glass of wine in hand, charming everyone with her radiant smile. I watched her from across the room, my heart pounding, not from love, but from anticipation. Jason arrived about an hour in, his wife Emily on his arm. She looked nervous, probably because she already knew what was coming. Jason, on the other hand, was all confidence, shaking hands and laughing like he owned the place. When he spotted Monica, his face lit up for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but I caught it. She did too, and I saw the panic flash in her eyes. "Dean," she called, her voice a little too loud. "Come meet Jason. He's one of the guys I've been working with on that charity project I told you about." I smiled and shook his hand, pretending I didn't know exactly who he was. "Nice to meet you," I said smoothly. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," he replied, flashing a grin. "Happy to be here." Oh, you won't be happy for long, I thought. About halfway through the night, I tapped my glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight." I began, my voice steady. "Monica and I are so lucky to have such wonderful friends and family. This year hasn't been easy, but it's reminded me how important it is to appreciate the people we love." Monica smiled at me from across the room, her cheeks flushed from the wine. She had no idea what was coming. "That's why I wanted to take a moment to honor my beautiful wife," I continued. "Monica, you've been my rock, my partner, and my greatest supporter. I don't know what I'd do without you." The room erupted into applause. Monica looked like she might cry, but I said, my tone shifting slightly, "There's more to love than just words. It's about trust, honesty. And I think it's time we all take a closer look at what those things really mean." The room fell silent. I grabbed the remote for the TV and pressed play. The first image appeared on the screen. Monica and Jason at the park, sitting close on a bench, laughing like teenagers. Gasps rippled through the room. Monica's smile froze and her face drained of color. The next image was even worse. Jason kissing Monica outside the bar. Then came the hotel receipt, her name printed clearly at the top alongside Jason's. "Dean," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can explain. Can you?" I asked coldly, turning to face her. "Because this looks pretty self-explanatory to me." Jason's wife, Emily, stood abruptly, her face red with anger. "You piece of garbage," she hissed, shoving him hard. "How could you do this to me? To our kids?" Jason tried to stammer out an apology, but Emily didn't wait to hear it. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Monica was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. "Dean, please," she begged. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean to hurt you." "Hurt me," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't just hurt me, Monica. You destroyed our family. You lied to me, to Ben, to everyone who trusted you." She sobbed, falling to her knees. "We can fix this. Please, we can go to counseling." "Fix this?" I laughed bitterly. "There's nothing left to fix." I turned to the room, my voice steady. "Thank you all for coming. I think we're done here." The guests filed out one by one, some offering me awkward pats on the shoulder, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Monica stayed on the floor, crying into her hands. When the house was finally empty, I stood over her, my heart cold. "I'll be filing for divorce first thing tomorrow," I said. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Dean," she sobbed, "please don't do this. You did this, I said firmly. Not me. And you'll be lucky if you ever see Ben again. She didn't have a response. Jason didn't stick around long after the party. After Emily stormed out, he tried to save face, stammering something about a misunderstanding, but no one was buying it. A couple of my friends, big guys who work with me on job sites, stepped forward. Maybe it's time for you to leave, one of them said, his voice low and firm. Jason nodded quickly, avoiding eye contact as he shuffled out the door. But his problems were just beginning. The next day, I got a call from Emily. She sounded calmer than she had at the party, but there was a sharp edge to her voice. I just wanted to thank you, Dean, she said, for telling me the truth. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm sorry you had to find out that way, I said honestly. Don't be, she replied. Jason made his choices. Now he gets to live with the consequences. She wasn't kidding. Within a week, Jason's entire life unraveled. Emily filed for divorce and took their kids to stay with her parents. His boss found out about the affair. Apparently, Monica wasn't the first woman he'd gotten involved with and fired him for violating company policy. The last I heard, Jason was living in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, drowning his sorrows in cheap whiskey. Monica didn't fare much better. The morning after the party, I sat her down at the kitchen table. She looked like a wreck, her eyes red and puffy, her hair a tangled mess. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady. She nodded, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. Dean, I'm filing for divorce, he interrupted, and I'm going for full custody of Ben. Her eyes widened in panic. Dean, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can go to therapy or take a break. It's too late for that, I said coldly. You didn't just cheat on me, Monica. You lied to me, to Ben, to everyone. And now, you're going to face the consequences. She started crying big, gasping sobs that filled the room. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said, standing up. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. I walked away, leaving her to cry alone. The divorce process wasn't easy, but I was ready for a fight. I had the photos, the phone records, the hotel receipt, everything I needed to prove that Monica wasn't fit to be Ben's primary parent. My lawyer was a shark, and Monica didn't stand a chance. During the custody hearing, she tried to paint herself as a devoted mother. She talked about all the sacrifices she'd made, how much she loved Ben. But when my lawyer presented the evidence, her story fell apart. Mrs. Hensley, he said, holding up a copy of the hotel receipt. Can you explain why you were staying in a hotel with a man who is not your husband? Monica stammered, her face turning bright red. I don't, that's enough, the judge said, cutting her off. In the end, the court awarded me full custody. Monica was ordered to pay child support. Not that she had much money left after the legal fees. For the first time in years, I felt free. Ben and I settled into a new routine, just the two of us. I threw myself into my work, building my business and saving for Ben's future. He threw himself into school and sports, thriving in a way I hadn't seen in years. One evening, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. Ben had a bowl of ice cream in his lap, and I was nursing a cold beer. Are you okay, Dad? He asked, breaking the silence. I looked at him and smiled. Yeah, buddy. I think I am. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. So do you, I said, ruffling his hair. And I promise, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. The weight I'd been carrying for so long was finally gone. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life worth living. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we were going to be okay. It's strange how life can change so completely in just a few months. If you told me at the beginning of the year that Monica and I would be divorced, that I'd be raising Ben on my own, I wouldn't have believed you. But sitting here now, watching Ben shoot hoops in the driveway while the evening sun dips below the horizon, I realize I'm okay with how things turned out. In fact, I'm more than okay. I'm finally at peace. Monica didn't disappear completely after the divorce. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town and tried to rebuild her life. From what I've heard, it hasn't been easy. She still sees Ben occasionally, though their relationship is strained. He hasn't forgiven her, and I don't blame him. Trust isn't something you can just snap your fingers and get back. One day, she showed up at the house unannounced. I wasn't thrilled to see her, but I let her in for Ben's sake. "How are you, Dean?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "Fine," I said shortly. "What do you need?" She winced, but I didn't feel bad. She'd burned that bridge the moment she decided I wasn't enough. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her eyes filling with tears. For everything, I nodded. "I appreciate that," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But it doesn't change anything." She wiped her eyes and left a few minutes later. I haven't heard much from her since. Jason, on the other hand, got exactly what he deserved. Last I heard, he was still living in that rundown motel, barely scraping by. Emily took everything in the divorce. His house, his savings, even his dog. His reputation was ruined, and no one in town wanted to do business with him anymore. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little satisfaction knowing he got what was coming to him. As for me and Ben, life has never been better. The business is doing well, better than ever. Actually, I even started working with a few new clients who heard about me through friends at the party. Funny how things work out sometimes. Ben's thriving too. He made the basketball team at school, and he's already talking about college. One night as we were sitting on the porch, he looked at me and said, "You know, Dad, I think we're better off without her." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him and smiled. "Maybe we are," I said finally, because he was right. Monica's betrayal hurt more than I thought I could bear, but it also set me free. Free to focus on the people who truly mattered. Free to build a life that wasn't weighed down by lies and deceit. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.